We are delighted today to have our final speaker of term, Ai Weiwei. Ai Weiwei is a Chinese artist and activist who works and lives in Beijing and Berlin. He's one of the leading cultural figures of his generation, and he constantly places himself at risk to effect social change and encourage free speech. Yana, who will be in discussion with him today, will give a more extensive introduction. Yana Peel is a British businesswoman, investor, writer, and philanthropist. She is CEO of the Serpentine Galleries in London. Prior to this, she ran the Intelligence Squared Group, the world's leading forum for live debate. Will you please join me in welcoming Ai Weiwei and Yana Peel?
Thank you very much, Matteo, for that very, very warm welcome. I am honored and humbled to be here on the kind invitation of the Heong Gallery at Downing College to speak with the extraordinary artist and activist Ai Weiwei. There is a Chinese saying I've heard many times over the past decade living in Hong Kong: may you live in interesting times. Whether or not that has been a blessing or a curse, hopefully we will hear from our guest who certainly has lived in the most exciting times of the day. Born to the celebrated poet I Ching, born radical as John Tancock, the curator of Cubes and Trees, would say, Ai Weiwei's family was exiled from Beijing to the countryside when he was just 1 year old during the anti-rightist, anti-intellectual purges that were the precursors to the Cultural Revolution. There, they were persecuted under the most degrading of conditions until Mao's death. Returning to Beijing in 1976, Weiwei attended film school, then very famously showed with the renowned avant-garde group of Stars artists. Then, sending himself perhaps into a self-imposed exile or refuge, he moved in a celebrated manner to the US. As some of you may know from the iconic New York photographs, Ai Weiwei attended Parsons, lived out the 80s among the era's most exciting protagonists at the intersection of East and West: Andy Warhol, Liu Xiaodong, Robert Frank, and Allen Ginsberg, just there. When Tiananmen Square shocked and shook the world, Ai Weiwei was undeterred by the protests and the government clampdown that followed. In fact, he chose to return to Beijing in the 90s, and after the death of his father, I Ching, became increasingly politicized in his work. It was there he set up fake design, curated the Fuck Off exhibition, turned his hand to architecture, and eventually founded the legendary Zaijiangdi. This Beijing East Village became a home for the city's experimental art scene, where so many turned to him as a mentor, and here you will see, as a friend. Perhaps too many for the Chinese government's taste. By the turn of the millennium, Weiwei's practice and influence had grown tremendously. With the advent of Sina Weibo a decade ago, the audiences for his blogs rose to 100,000 a day. The critique of the Communist Party also grew exponentially. In 2008, first seemingly collaborating with the government, or perhaps with Herzog de Meuron on the Bird's Nest Pavilion, he then called the Olympics a propaganda show. After the Sichuan earthquake, which left over 5,000 children dead from shoddy corruption, he raised a spotlight to the corruption in what he called construction made of tofu dregs. Free speech, human rights became the focus, and art increasingly grew into acts. One small act is worth 1 million thoughts, he so famously said that day. But one big act, the closure of his Weibo account, meant that 1 million followers were shut down and his voice was somewhat muted. With that said, Weiwei found many other outlets, major ones in fact, like the enormous one, the Turbine Hall at Tate. How many of you here saw or heard about that extraordinary exhibition, Sunflower Seeds? Those who did will never forget that extraordinary endless landscape that we see here. 100 million individually crafted ceramic seeds made in Jingdezhen, but looking like a sea of migrants, a sea of refugees, perhaps a sea of Cambridge students, increasingly uniform and the same. During the Tate exhibition, at the height of success and critical acclaim, Ai Weiwei was arrested at Beijing Capital International Airport, held for economic crimes for 81 days. Shortly thereafter, his studio was demolished in a surprise move by the local government, and his passport taken away, incredibly, until last year. And what a year 2015 turned out to be. Ai Weiwei 360 at the Royal Academy was the cultural phenomenon of the year. Last time I had the pleasure and privilege of seeing Weiwei, it was at an interview with the Royal Academy's brilliant program director, Tim Marlowe, who was actually just here earlier today. And Tim was interviewing Weiwei, who was preparing to embark on a walk of solidarity with fellow artists and refugees from around the world. Today, his march continues. Many big acts and millions of thoughts. No longer is it his own plight that he is bringing to global awareness. A dissident who has sought refuge in the West, he is now shining a light on Europe's humanitarian failure. Ai Weiwei, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We were just talking about how you left China in the 80s, and pressure at the time, I guess, for artists was mounting. But I've always been curious why you left, particularly at the time you did for New York.
Hello. You can hear me, yeah? Because your voice is very loud for me.
It's very low.
It's good.
Should I make it higher?
No, it's very perfect. And I left China 81, and that was a moment several of my friends got arrested. That was during the first democratic war movement. So even someone like me grew up in the very severe political condition, but still you don't really understand it till your fellow friends or students being arrested. Then you really sense the danger. So I decided I have to go to leave China. Anywhere I would like to just to leave. You know, I think it's very dangerous to stay. That's how I got to United States.
And now you've left China again. Are there any parallels in terms of why you have found yourself back out in the West?
Yeah, I went back in '93, and I broke my promise. I said I will never go back to China again. But '93, my father was quite ill, so after 12 years being in New York, I said maybe I have to go back. So I stayed there for 20 some years. It's really fast, and then I got into all kind of trouble you just talked about. Then I have to make a decision. Do I really still can stay there, or I can spend some time with my son? I have a son, 7 years old now, and I sent him away to Berlin because I sense it's not fair for him if I get arrested. You know, he's still too young to understand everything. So I said, okay, maybe I just try to behave myself a little bit to get the permission to travel again. So now I'm here. So, yeah.
Well, it's very fortunate for us. As I read some of the quotes, I noticed that you had said, "I will never leave China. China is mine." I wonder, as you have come back just several days ago.
Yeah, I come back yesterday, actually. Yeah, I still feel China is mine, and it belongs to 1 billion or more people like me. But at the same time, I never feel China is mine, because that over 1 billion people never had the rights to vote or to have any chance to give up their opinions. And even after 60 years of communist control, they still don't trust the people. They will never let them have a chance to talk about politics, to give out their opinion, even just on the internet or on some kind of WeChat or. So, a friend of mine, a lawyer, Xiang got arrested and charged, sentenced only because less than 2,000 of his WeChat post, which is it's quite shocking. People can get sentenced in today because it's a mini blog. So that's a reality.
I think for us that was driven home with, can you hear me? Is that all right? The plight of the booksellers and what happened while we were living in Hong Kong. How do you find the environment is for artists, particularly in China today?
China always played two sides. On one side, it looks very fast developing, quite booming, and they try to talk to the West like we are the same. We speak same language, we play same roles. But on the other hand, it's politically very under such a severe condition. There's almost no change at all. In certain areas, even getting tighter. So for artists, if you don't question the fundamental aesthetics or moral or philosophical discussions, if you not challenge those aspects or not to give critical thinking, then everything's fine. It looks so prosper, and so many artists doing fantastic work, very skillful, very playful. But they all have one thing in lacking is they have no clear attitude toward this kind of society. They all give out their very basic rights to argue, to questioning the authority, and they're happy about it. So that's the condition.
It's interesting, as you talk about that contradiction, I've always felt that contradiction plays itself out in your work as well. Someone who's seemingly so urban, having lived in Beijing, in New York, now in Berlin, and yet there's always this return to the ecology. There's a leitmotif of nature, a recurrence of trees. Is that something you can touch upon as we sit here among the exhibition, of course, cubes and trees? What is this recurring theme of nature that seemingly contradicts the very urban and technologically driven, forward-thrusting nature of your work?
It's very hard to talk about that. I never really liked the nature till I'm getting quite old. Like now, I'm almost 60 years old, but I always like people, humans' activity. I like city, like bright light and crowded and dirty, or all those kind of city phenomena. I never really liked the nature that much because I was growing up in very wild nature, in the Gobi Desert near Russian border, and I don't have much feeling about it. So, and about my work, I'm not always. I'm quite casual about it, actually. Certain vocabularies I use not so necessarily reflects my aesthetic opinion. I should say, maybe many people will be disappointed, but I really take it very loose, and I think this just traces. I'm like a man walking a long journey. I don't care about every step. As long as I still can walk toward. I'm not always walking very gracefully, so it's always questionable.
Well, you're always working and marching with purpose. And I think what I thought this morning as I went to the Tate to see the opening of the tremendous new building by Herzog de Meuron, who are very dear friends and collaborators of Weiwei, from what I understand, was the amazing tree within the context of the museum. And this made me think about how you feel about the context of where your work is displayed. Does it change if the tree is in the nature? Does it change when it's in the museum? Does the context matter to you very much? And how does this define the perception of the people who interact with it?
It sounds very complicated. I made the tree, and the tree is from branches in the different mountain ranges, and it doesn't really belong to the same kind of tree. And I put together, and looks like tree, and everybody.
So they're grafted together.
Yeah. And I would never imagine it can go to Tate. It's a tree stayed in my studio for past 15 years. Till one day someone says maybe, for some strange reason they would put it in some other location. I just say, okay, fine. It's not my responsibility anymore. So, yeah, it's just like that. It doesn't have a profound meaning.
But interesting, 5 years on, it's a very different moment in the
It's very hard to be honest, but I try to make it short.
Lots of people wandering around the tree, thinking about the meaning of the tree.
No.
And now we know.
Yeah. I only thing I worried is because the structure may be not so solid, then some branches may fall down on somebody. That makes me feel nervous. Because in the West, anything like that happen would really make a front page. And
but you shone a spotlight. If we talk about construction practices in what I think was one of the most extraordinary works of highlighting government corruption, when in fact the Sichuan earthquakes did unearth the corruption, the construction practices. And I'd love to maybe share with this audience the work there that, as you say, got you in some trouble, but also really changed the world in the way that we look at issues, which are even being highlighted with anti-corruption summits by David Cameron here today. Can you tell us about Sichuan and the work that...
Yeah, and Sichuan had an earthquake. This is really like a natural disaster, but the only thing is not natural. It's about 70,000 people lost their lives. And the government said, because it's earthquake, what do you expect? But Japan have earthquake, many places has earthquake, but not so many places have such a big number of people lost their life. But in China, if you're a farmer, you build house yourself. So if the building collapse, you're the one bear the cost. So you cannot blame the government. The farmer's life is never really precious there. But the school buildings are built by government, and it collapsed. 5,000 students disappeared, and everybody was shocked because this building should not collapse. The building next to school still standing there, and so we questioned about it, and the government would never give you a clear answer how many people being killed and who are they, and So I said, okay, that's easy. That time I was crazy on internet. I said, let me do a investigation on internet. So I organized volunteers to see if anybody want to come with me to research for who is dead and what's their name and which school they belongs to. And many young people joined us. So we went to Sichuan, which is very remote location. And we found over about a year of research, we found about over 5,000 students, their name, birthdays, which school they belongs to. of course, our team got arrested about 40 times. Every time the police would erase our materials or delete our photos, and but still we managed everything. So every day I would post the new findings on my blog that made the whole nation start to watch us. People first time in their life to see a citizen or artist, a stupid artist, can do something like this, and the government got very nervous because this is like a first civil movement in this kind of direction, and then they shut down my blogs. And later I was testifying, supposed to testify before a fellow researcher. Then I got sized in like a motel in the very early morning. I was beaten and almost cost my life. So then gradually I become more and more involved in politics. But it all started from very simple question, very little truth, very little the right number, the right people, and you always think you can do it. That's easy, but you never can imagine the result can be very devastating.
So you mentioned being arrested 14, 15 times. You mentioned the more politicized nature, the spotlight on you. What was it that finally brought the issue to the pinnacle that we saw when your exhibition here at Tate put you in a situation where you were not a free man? What was it then that actually led to the arrest for 81 days?
Well, that's right after Arab Spring. So China become very nervous. They suddenly saw in the Middle East, several nations can just overnight turn to change the power, change the status. But still, the problem's still there. But that moment, nobody can imagine, but everybody celebrates that. So that made the Chinese government very nervous. Think this guy on internet can easily become someone organize this kind of subversion of state power. So they target me. They think I'm the one who is going to organize it. I don't know where they get this information, which is really. I'm just an artist. I never really imagined that. So, and I got arrested.
It's interesting. At the time, the West really rallied around you. There was so much support for Ai Weiwei. There was a very strong moment there. I was living in Hong Kong, sharing an art space called Parasite, and I felt there was a lot more conflict where I was sitting in terms of how to react to this moment. But I felt the West was very, very supportive and really wanted to raise an issue on that. As you turn the spotlight on the West's inadequacies, how have you felt the response to that when it's no longer about your own plight and your own issues, but when you are putting the lens, the mirror, somewhere else?
I didn't pay much attention till people put commentary on under my Instagram, or they say, okay, if I always talk about China's problem, he always on the front page. Now he's talking about human rights in the West. Nobody pay much attention, which is not true. A lot of media still pay a lot of attention, but there's too many things to pay attention to. Donald Trump or some shootings here and there. So of course, I still think that there's a lot of attention about the activities of fighting I'm doing. So.
It's interesting. You mentioned your Instagram, and I think many people probably follow your life through that. I recently noticed a posting of Walt Whitman, and I thought how interesting in terms of poetry. There also seems to be a recurrence there, and I wondered, is poetry still a daily practice for you, or is the blogging, is the social media superseded your focus on the poetry that, of course, has been such a part of you from your father's legacy and beyond?
Yeah, Walter Whitman is a art poet influenced my father. And of course, when I was young, I also quite impressed about this man. And today, I don't read poetry anymore. I look at Twitter. I think many Twitter messages just like poetry to me. And yeah, I don't really read poetry that much.
Did you learn to paint from your father?
My father learned painting when he was in Paris, and then after he got back to China, he was being put in jail, and I never see him. He paints. When he released from jail, he became a poet, and he's the most influential poet in China. Yeah, very casually I see him make some drawings, which when I was very young, it's quite impressive. You know how a pencil and a white paper under this man, just a few lines would make a world right in front of you. It's very impressive. So maybe that influenced me a little bit.
And Allen Ginsberg, if we look at the beat poets of the 80s, tell us a little bit about your relationship there.
We are just normal relations. Alan is very kind man, and in the 80s, I met him on poetry reading St. Mark's Church, and also a location called a gas station. And we often together, and he would read his long poems to me. I don't understand that much, but I just sitting there because he's quite a lonely man. Also, I think we would spend Christmas time together because we both have no place to go, and yeah, I would listen to him to read his poetry.
Was Andy Warhol a good writer?
Warhol is a very casual writer. He would never think he's a good writer, but I liked his writing. It's just common language, and he also even write diary, which surprised me after he passed away. And you see Andy Warhol's diary published. He records everything, every penny he spent.
Yeah. It's amazing. The favorite title, of course, A to B and Back Again. And when I was in Melbourne in December, I was just amazed at the popularity of the Ai Weiwei Andy Warhol show, which I know has also now traveled.
It's very strange.
Technology. AI is fine, but VR is always a problem. The Andy Warhol show, I found it amazing to think of that connection, which might seem like an improbable pairing, but it was incredibly popular. I'd love to hear about how that show with Andy Warhol came about.
Yeah, it's a strange. You never would imagine you can be put in shows like this. Andy Warhol is representing American century, American art, and I think he's the most interesting artist from that time. And I come from China. I have nothing in common. I come from a communist society, and until today, I don't go to night clubs, or it's not. I'm afraid. I just feel shy to be in nightclubs, and I don't have much to say to other people. It's very loud, and
maybe after dinner tonight, that's a challenge.
and Warhol, he goes to all the openings, and he has his own club, and I don't see so much in common, but the life is very strange. Warhol once said, "Be careful what you want; you may really get it." So now I have a show in Pittsburgh. Andy Warhol, Ai Weiwei, but I do find something in common. We all desperately want to communicate. We love social media, and he creates his own social media, interviews, television, and and I love social media. So we always trying to find a language to communicate.
I find also commonality in giving simple objects new perspectives. And I think of this potential hero for many of us, Marcel Duchamp. I love the comment, "I am my own ready-made," and I think that that has fascinatingly also translated into some of the architecture, if we may touch on that. A question that I've always had for you is 2008, the Bird's Nest. Of course, there's more than 50 architectural projects, some as tiny as the one you so generously created with Vito Conchi in Hong Kong many years back. But this grand gesture at the height of such a charged political moment, why did you choose to build the Bird's Nest in 2008?
2008, I think, is a very critical moment. China desperately trying to find a symbolic gesture which relate to China, to the West, to really open to gain this kind of trust, and to say we're the same. We speak same language, and the Olympics certainly offer this kind of moment. And I was not involved. I was involved in architecture, but I doesn't belong to any working unit. And when Herzog Demron was invited for competition, they're the one asked me if I want to join in, because for them China is a really foreign land, and they understand perfectly well to do architecture in foreign land could be very problematic. I think they found the right person. They're very smart, and so I said yes. For me, it's architecture project. It's not anything political. But I certainly think that to have the Olympic would be nice for China to change faster, to have a more liberal status, and to give a more space for democratic practice. And yeah, we somehow we won the competition, which was rather very easy, because we made a project which so different from others. It's just standing out, and it's very brave, have a very strong passion, and technically also quite very gutsy project. And yeah, and China, it fits China's ambition, to have a very strong image. So, but as I quickly realized, China is not going to be a more free, but rather a more tighter society, because once they want to show the West, they're very nervous. They really crash down on many migrants, and all those become much tighter. So I started to criticize. So many people would think, how come you involved at the beginning, but you criticize later? I still love the architecture part, but I don't like how it's being used. That's, I don't know, is that clear to you?
I think very clear, and we will pick that up in the Q&A as well, I'm sure, in several minutes. What I'd love to ask you is about some of the very brave acts that you've been doing most recently. You have said everything is art, everything is politics, and I would love to share with the audience some of the work that you've been doing on Lesvos in recent months.
Yes. It's not it's also very, of course, this refugee situation has drawn everybody's attention. People feel very frustrated. Normally, when people feel frustrated, you just feel powerless. What can you do? The problem is getting too big. So I try to see if I can use my position or to find a language to give a statement through my specialty, my art, or my social status. So I brought my boy and my girlfriend to Lesvos. I said, it's a vacation, but it's not a vacation there. We drove around on the island. It's a very peaceful day, and blue ocean and sunshine. Then we see a boat come in front of us. That moment, you don't believe it. Then we jump out of the car, start to filming with my iPhone. Then from that moment, it's shaking. When you see the people come out from the disaster, it's really, you couldn't believe it. The baby crying, all those women climb out the boat. And so then we went to camp. We realized they have no place to stay. They stayed in the wet, dark, cold tents. And basically nobody helped them. Then you realize about 500,000 of the people come this way and in same condition. So I decide to have a studio because I decide to stay. And so we set up a studio and we start to do documenting and research. And the more you learn, and more it drag you in, because it's so much. So the big problem is so big and such a complex, and it requires total involvement. So we set up a film team, about a few dozen people, and 7, 8 of camera teams in different locations start to do documentary film. And still today we're still working on it. We have been in many locations in Middle East, in Europe.
Will this form the basis of Human Flow? Is that the film?
Yes, it's a working title about the refugee situation globally. Yeah.
So the need to intervene, I think, will lead me to the final photograph before we move to Q&A. And that has been a photograph that has made so many headlines, a photograph on the beach. Can you tell us more of the photograph that was, of course, following what we saw of Alan Kurdi, the travesty of the Syrian boy who washed up on the Bodrum beach? This is a photograph, I think, that was incredibly poignant, that made global headlines, that drove emotion.
Well, it's a photo requested by an Indian magazine. They are doing a cover story about my involvement with refugee, and the photographer said, can you, he's kind of shy. He said, can you post such and such? I noticed that photo, of that boy, but I said, yes, that's, we have to find a beach. Then I just did it. The whole process is less than 10 minutes. And then I didn't pay any attention, because this magazine is supposed to be in India, and I never see the magazine since then, and I never only see this photograph appeared on internet, and people make a lot of criticize and said, how could you do this? And well, it's I heard a lot of criticize, but I don't understand why can't I do this. I mean, as an artist, any form, any media, any performance gesture, it's my personal interpretation of a situation. And but you can see artwork like this, it works itself. It generates so much discussion. Each day, there's 2 child in past year drowned but people only paid attention to this particular photo. They don't pay attention, like during our talk today, we'll have another 2 children drowned. And this year is already over 1,700 people drowned. And the last year, 3,773 people drowned. It's like 10 jets being shot down. And do we pay attention to it? I don't think so. I don't think. Maybe because they are Arabs. Maybe because their life doesn't worth as much. But, you know, people are dying. And the people dying for the reason we all somehow relate to. We all know it, but we pretend we don't know it. So I always feel my work or my activity can generate those kind of questions. It's not about blame anybody, but it's about questioning about our human condition, about our humanity, about how our society would function or not functioning, and what is the future about it.
Well, I think there's also a lot of questioning that is to be done in this room, and I think to keep us on time, it's best if Matteo leads us in that questioning, if you're all right.
Yeah, absolutely. If there are any questions from the audience, please put your hand up and please wait for a microphone to reach you before you do. So are there any questions right here?
I'm sorry, I'm going to lower the tone right at the beginning of the Q&A session. I watched the film documentary about you this weekend, and one of the most visceral moments was when different people associated with you in their different accents said the very direct phrase, "fuck you, motherland." And that was the most visceral moment for me because it meant taking on all this danger of being so direct. There's no misinterpreting what you meant there. When you were working in Lesvos and in Greece, who else would you like to say fuck you to when you saw the plight of the people who came there and the lack of help that they got?
It's always a question for me about this patriotism. You know, I grew up in communist society, and in what sense I would relate to my so-called homeland, and what the land gives to me, or how much I would bear responsibility to it. Am I allowed to really contribute or to devote myself to that land? And all those are really questions. And when I see today's world, you know, people have to give up whatever they have, you know, they rather to go to any direction just to escape from their land, you know, just to trying to protect the future of their children, or even the people 70, 80, or 90 years old have to take the journey. And so you always have to think about what is the home still can protect them, or the home is the one to hurting them. So under today globalization, you see all the interests of the big power still played a dramatic factor of to divide us, or to really decide our fate, or people who is powerless, or only can bear the consequence. I mean, in today's world, we see 90,000 refugees. They have to relocate, or to leave their country. Some refugees, 3 generations, still has never have the chance to go back. And the average refugees spend 17 years as a refugee status. So I once said, 70 years, it could be a child, missed all whole education. A young man would be failed because can never find a job. And an old man would die without any kind of house care or people care about them. So our humanity is in very bad condition today, and it's never like what, if you walk out here, you see how peaceful and how beautiful the life could be, but it's not real, it's not exactly real like this. So it only depends how far you want to see and how much you want to know about it.
Any other questions? Yeah, right here. Can you wait for a microphone?
Thank you. You said when you were speaking about the bird's nest that you still liked the architecture, but you don't like the way in which people are using it anymore. Do you have any advice for any other people, be they architects, engineers, scientific researchers, writers, who produce something which then gets hijacked or taken over by political interests or economic powers? Do you have any advice for these people to how to retaliate, how to deal with the fact that their work is being taken for a purpose that they never envisaged it being used for and never intended it to be used for?
Well, many cases, the building are built are not as architects' original thinking. Sometimes could be better, It's only the case in China. The stadium is supposed to be a public, it's built for the public. It's a stadium, but never really used for the public, and it's never become a active part of the city. It's never because China never lets its citizens freely enjoy sport or rock and roll or any kind of events. So I don't know. Those things are most happened in this kind of totalitarian society. I don't know in the West the situation will be that dramatic. So I couldn't answer that.
Any other questions? Yeah, over here.
You seem to have a very controversial relationship with China in all ways. Your work feeds politically on the repression, and on the other hand, it also, you seem to, it is manufactured, much of it in China. Do you see yourself really working outside China, or will you keep continuing this relationship?
I think artists working by given conditions. If I stay in China, of course I have to work with Chinese craftsmen or production teams. But if I'm not there, it's not necessary. I can work in any condition, and it doesn't really affect my ability to making something. For example, I'm making a huge film now, and the team we are using Belgians or French and Greece and somebody from China, from our own team, and it's an international team, and Turkey, a team from Turkey. Yeah.
Questions? Are there any on the balcony? Over here.
Thank you so much for coming to speak. Being from Hong Kong and having participated in the 2014 umbrella protests and bearing witness to a lot of the social unrest that's happened in the past, in the recent years, I was wondering whether, or rather, how optimistic are you about the future changes that China might undergo, including democratization or expansion of freedoms, and whether or not you're looking forward to, or whether you have the idea of going home one day and not being under the regime of repression that currently exists?
I think in the long run, China is moving forward. Even it's very difficult today, but still, China, for its own surviving, it has to move forward, and it's such a struggle. They try to have a free enterprise and to have the liberty to make the economic working, but same time they have to have a strong state control on both economy, also on the ideology, and also on all those freedom of speech, human rights, or all those issues. So it doesn't, it's self-destructive. It doesn't really work that well, and you can see now come to a quite difficult moment. And but I believe strongly China will move forward, and otherwise it cannot survive.
Right here.
I'd like to know whether you have any regrets, anything that you might have done differently on reflection or not done.
I don't have regrets, and I did always a little bit more than I can handle, and I always realize that later, and it's my character, and I think I can never really change it, so I don't have regrets, and yeah.
Question right here.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your exhibition at the Royal Academy of Art. I just want to say that it was amazing. I want to raise quite a controversial subject, and I want to ask you about it. Do you think the Charlie Hebdo cases were justified in terms of I know that, as an artist, what is your opinion on these other artists, drawing something provocative that was, was going to make people angry and upset? Do you think that was justified?
I think artists can express itself, and I think all those ideas, not necessarily right or wrong, but the freedom of to express yourself, and it's most important activity in human struggle, and by not by take extreme measure to trying to silence the voice, it's I think that is a crime. It's a crime to humanity, and I don't think that can ever win the game. And we're born as a human, which the character of us is we can think any way we like, and we can talk about things any way any opinions we have. And as long as you're not, and of course you have to bear some kind of consequence, and you have to respect certain other people's belief. But those struggles come together as a total struggle for human to find out and how to respect and how to learn from each other. I don't think you can really avoid this kind of conflicts. And we are born very different, and we belong to very different belief system. So I don't think you can find a right answer for that.
Fantastic. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, so we won't be able to entertain any more questions. But I think you can all join me in thanking Yana and Weiwei for being here today.